Art of Usagi Meteor, Part 176, Dead Boy Detectives. This show is another case where we sort of see autistic coded characters, but we don't actually see any autistic characters. I've gotten many requests for the show, primarily for Edwin, but also a few for Nico, and outside of just the traditional, this is a supernatural show, so all the supernatural characters are going to act outside of the norm for the purposes of seeming odd that involve some traits that we commonly associate with autistic and or queer coding, but don't necessarily mean the character is autistic or queer. There are also even more circumstances at hand with these characters. For Nico in particular, much of what we initially learn about how she communicates and inhabits her body is while she is possessed, which does look like autistic coding to some degree. But after that, once she is no longer possessed, it's easy to see other potentially autistic traits more highlighted because you've been primed to see them in her before this time, even though I would not consider her amount of autistic traits later in the season to be statistically significant here. There's also the fact that she's dealing with a lot of grief and self-isolation, so she's a bit rustier with social skills simply because she hasn't used them. Edwin as well is in a similar boat where he spent a great deal of time in hell, presumably based on what we see of that time not really ever really interacting with anyone. He also is somebody from a different era plopped into this one, so he does speak differently from others. He seems more rigid about things and doesn't always follow every social cue or blend in culturally because he's from a completely different world functionally. Is there a world where any of the characters in the show could be autistic or otherwise neurodivergent? Absolutely, especially since many of these characters are queer and hear voices. But based on the data at hand from this show, I think there are way more confounding factors at hand that explain the traits that people are pointing out as being autistic infinitely better than autism ever could. Not to mention that the genre itself almost requiring weirdness and a slight lean toward the archetype and the extreme in characterization. To be clear, like if you see yourselves in them, that's awesome. You can still do that regardless of what their neurotype might or might not be, but from a media analysis perspective, I would not consider this to be autism representation.